A runaway girl named Sayu stayed at strangers' houses in exchange for them being able to use her body. Then, she met Yoshida, who let her stay with him normally, without doing anything weird. She ran away because of how controlling her mother was and how poorly she treated her, although her brother came to get her, and she is now flying back home to meet her mother. Yoshida decides to go with Sayu and support her when facing her mother. Upon arriving at the airport, the group is driven to Sapporo by a chauffeur. This surprises Yoshida, as he figured they lived in Asahikawa, but Issa details that's where a branch of his company is at, where he needs to quickly pick something up. Noticing Sayu listlessly staring out the window suggests the two spend some time together, and the suggestion cheers Sayu up a bit. Later, they visit a cafe, and Sayu reveals that she's never really been to a cafe before. When the two decide what they want, Yoshida gets the waitress's attention and orders a hot coffee for himself, and Sayu orders a green tea au lait. Just then, Sayu notices a couple of girls sitting outside on a bench and notes that her mother didn't like it when she returned home late after school. By doing this, Sayu's mother would punish her, and Sayu would never have the time to go into a cafe. Sayu then mentions how happy she was being able to finally enter a cafe for no reason with Yoshida. A bit pleased to hear that, Yoshida then asks if Sayu is afraid to return home, and Sayu responds that she is, but notes that's why Yoshida is going with her, to help with being scared. Their beverages are then served, and they enjoy them. By evening, Yoshida and Sayu are driven to Asahikawa Dairoku High School by Issa at Sayu's request. At the location, Sayu is notably nervous, and accompanied by Yoshida, the two sneak into the school avoiding the front gate, as it has cameras placed around it. Although Yoshida notes that they're basically trespassing on the school grounds, however, Sayu argues he's done something far worse than that. To that, Yoshida admits that Sayu is right on that point. Inside the school, Sayu, although fearful, states that she wants to head up to the rooftop. At the top of the stairway to the rooftop, Sayu tries to open the door, but is unable to unlock the door. Therefore, she goes through a nearby window onto the roof. Trembling with fear, Sayu asks Yoshida to come with her, and Yoshida acquiesces. Immediately, Sayu has flashbacks of her time there with Yuko, one of Sayu's friends who took her own life due to bullying, which is one of the reasons Sayu ran away. She then slowly moves across the roof and falls on her knees by the bench where Yuko and her used to sit. Concerningly, Yoshida asks if Sayu is all right, and she reassures Yoshida that she is, and details that spot she's in is where it all began. Sayu then rushes over to the fence set up around the rooftop, and curses that it wasn't there sooner, and blames herself for Yuko dying. Grabbing a hold of Sayu's hand, Yoshida then notices that it was bleeding due to the fence's condition, and states that it wasn't her fault. On the other hand, Sayu argues that it was her fault as she didn't protect Yuko well enough, and Yuko should have found another friend that could have. However, Yoshida retorts that if it wasn't for the bullying, they'd be fine, and that Yuko sincerely wanted to be her friend. From there, Yoshida reasons with Sayu that it wasn't her fault, and that she needs to forgive herself or else she'll be mentally stuck on that rooftop forever. Sayu then has a tearful meltdown, and Yoshida reaches into his pocket to get a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. Time goes by, and both Yoshida and Sayu sit against the bench on the rooftop, and Sayu thanks Yoshida for coming with her. Standing up, a blast of wind whips by Sayu's face, and she calmly states that she'll see Yuko again sometime. While leaving the school grounds, Sayu promises to buy Yoshida a new handkerchief, but Yoshida dismisses that offer and asks if she's okay now. Sayu answers that she isn't, but then stands in front of the school softly stating that she's ready to face her mother. The two then return to Issa's car, and they drive to the Ojawara household, where once they enter the home, Sayu's mother immediately slaps Sayu on the face and berates her for disappearing that had caused nasty rumors to be spread around about her. Issa steps in and tries to reason with his mother and introduces Yoshida as someone who took care of Sayu for a long time. Sayu's mother scoffs at the fact that Yoshida took care of Sayu for a long time and walks away. Left standing in the hallway, Yoshida and Sayu are led into the dining room by Issa, where they all sit at the table and discuss her decision to run away from home. Sayu's mother mentions that it brought their family more problems than when she was home. Sayu gives no response, and Sayu's mother continues a bit before Sayu cuts her off, saying that her mother isn't even trying to understand. Sayu's mother brushes off the comment, but Sayu asks if her mother recalls what she said to her before she left, but she doesn't. This proves to Sayu that her mother doesn't care about or even try to understand her. Commenting how Sayu has only been home for 5 minutes and she's already complaining, and then claims that she left just to spite her family. However, Seiyu firmly rejects that notion and says she did it to get away from the mother who never tried to understand her and tried to blame her for her friend Yuko's death. As the conversation continues between Seiyu and her mother, Yoshida begins to understand why Seiyu left her family in the first place. The conversation then shifts over to about Yoshida, where Sayu's mother speaks disparagingly about Yoshida and how he took care of Seiyu. Yoshida speaks up for himself, saying he was well aware of the risks of taking care of Seiyu, but Sayu's mother still speaks in a rude and crude manner towards him. Seiyu then speaks out, saying that time and time again her mother berates the people that Seiyu is close with and hates her because of it. She then defends Yoshida, saying while she hated herself for running away, Yoshida not only helped and took care of her, but he also gave her emotional support. Sayu's mother then goes on a rant and says that she never should have given birth to Seiyu. After a pause from everyone in the room, Seiyu bursts into tears, and Yoshida almost throws his tea at Sayu's mother, but stops himself and drinks it instead. Yoshida then recounts how he almost threw his cup at Sayu's mother, but stopped short, noting the two different feelings within him, those being one of anger and another of calmness, both of which are balancing each other out. He also contemplates how people do not choose to be born, and how they learn to be responsible for themselves as they grow up. Speaking what he just contemplated over, Yoshida also declares that he'd like to take care of Seiyu until she's an adult. But he also says he can't do that, and that it's not his responsibility to do that, but rather Seiyu's mother's. Yoshida then gets off his chair and prostrates himself to Seiyu's mother, begging her that she take care of Seiyu until she's an adult. Seiyu's mother is perplexed that a stranger would do that for her, and to her astonishment, Issa begs her too. Because of the two of them begging her to take care of Seiyu again, Seiyu's mother has a nervous breakdown, and both Yoshida and Seiyu wait outside of the house. Outside of the house, Yoshida cries and says that hearing her mother say that she never should have given birth to her is far worse than he had expected. He then says that Seiyu should have gotten angry at her mother because of it, but Seiyu mentions that she did want to get angry, but he did first and tearfully thanks him for it. The two then start to cry together, and later both enjoy the sight of the beautiful night sky. Seiyu then mentions that when Yoshida begged on his knees to her mother, she felt as if she was forgiven. Touching Yoshida's hand, Seiyu says that it's all right now, she'll be fine on her own from now on. Reassured by what Seiyu said, Yoshida says he understands and grasps her hand while wishing her the best. Enjoying each other's company, Yoshida reflects on the universe and how he met Seiyu, until Issa meets with them and informs them of what he discussed with Seiyu and his mother. Seiyu will be able to stay at home until she graduates, and as long as she doesn't cause any trouble, Seiyu's mother won't bother her. Issa also claims that Yoshida had a big influence on their mother's decision. He also notes his envy for Yoshida begging his mother to take in Seiyu again, and doing it in a way that reinforced that he meant it. Before retiring for the night, Yoshida asks if he could speak with Seiyu's mother again, and Issa allows it. Back inside the house, Yoshida apologizes for his outburst earlier, and Seiyu's mother brushes it off as too late. She does ask if he really never did anything to Seiyu, to which he firmly denies. When asked by her why he'd go so far for her, he responds that it's because he met her that day in that moment, and that's the only reason. Seiyu's mother then says she'll talk things over with Seiyu, and that Yoshida should return to Tokyo the following day. After leaving the dining room where he talked with Seiyu's mother, Yoshida spots Seiyu standing next to her brother Issa on the staircase. She walks past Yoshida and says that she wants to talk with her mother next, and once she enters the room, Seiyu apologizes to her mother for the trouble she's caused, and prostrates herself to her. This action leaves Seiyu's mother perplexed, as Seiyu confesses that her built-up frustration for her made her run away, even though it caused trouble for her mother and brother. Again, Seiyu apologizes and prostrates herself to her mother, who refuses to apologize in return. However, Seiyu mentions how her private meeting with Yoshida changed her, and asks if she really is Seiyu's only parent. Seiyu emotionally and tearfully answers, yes. In light of this, Seiyu's mother says that she needs to finish her time in school, which she's going to be held back a year, and when she's finished, she may do whatever she wants. Once her mother leaves the room, Seiyu says thank you, and then speaks with Yoshida about how she was able to talk to her mother calmly for the first time. To that, Yoshida praises Seiyu as Issa eavesdrops on the conversation between them. Afterward, Yoshida readies himself for bed, and when he does, he struggles to go to sleep. Eventually, Sayu joins him because she wanted to spend their last day together in bed with each other. They then talk about Sayu's being able to live her life without him, and while Sayu doesn't want their time to end, Yoshida is confident that she'll be fine. The conversation then changes to a mature request, whereas Sayu asks if she can make love to Yoshida for posterity's sake. However, once again, Yoshida refuses to accept it as he says they spent over half a year together not as lovers or family. That in itself was enough to preserve the memory of them being together. Tearful again, Sayu embraces Yoshida as he says that Sayu is such a crybaby. Sayu then asks Yoshida if he'd like to touch her chest, however, Yoshida refuses. Later, as Sayu sleeps soundly in bed, Yoshida watches her sleep while sitting on a chair. The following day, Yoshida is dropped off at the Hokkaido airport by both Issa and Sayu. In a terminal way, Issa asks Sayu to go on ahead and allow him to speak with Yoshida alone for a bit, and she accepts. Alone together, Issa hands Yoshida an envelope filled with money for the airplane fare. However, Yoshida refuses to accept it as Issa already paid for his plane tickets. On the other hand, Issa still insists, but Yoshida still refuses and suggests he use the money to buy Sayu some new clothes. Understanding Yoshida's sentiment, Issa then asks if he likes Sayu. To that, Yoshida denies it, saying he likes older women, which Issa understands. Issa then says that if Yoshida didn't get drunk or went home a little earlier than he intended to, he'd never meet his sister. Because of that, Issa then sincerely thanks Yoshida. The two then shake hands and part ways. By the terminal gates, Yoshida talks with Sayu briefly about what he talked about with her brother. When the announcement of Yoshida's plane is now able to be boarded, Yoshida tries to part ways with Sayu, but she stops him, confessing that she's glad that she ran away from home, because if she didn't, she'd never have met Yoshida in the first place. And after hearing this, Yoshida says that he's glad that he met her too. Sayu then confesses her love for Yoshida, but he states that he likes older women. However, Yoshida does compliment her appearance, but confesses that he cannot see her the same way that she feels for him. Asking if she'll have a chance when she's older, Yoshida says he'll be far too old for her then, and suggests that she puts the memories of their time together in a box to live her new life. Sayu tearfully mentions that a box isn't big enough to contain her precious memories with him, and then grasps Yoshida's hands and promises to one day meet him again. Yoshida acknowledges it, and Sayu starts to cry over it. With that, the two go their separate ways, and Yoshida boards his plane, and Sayu returns to her brother's car. That evening, at Yoshida's apartment, Yoshida finds a special note left by Sayu, as well as a button-up shirt that she wore with her scent on it, and her own recipe book. Believing he has no need to use the book, Yoshida then tries cooking his own miso soup, but when he tastes it, he comments how bad it is, and it fails to compare to Sayu's. Shedding a tear, Yoshida falls backward and claims that he's not okay. 2 years pass by, and Yoshida at work helps his co-worker Yuzuha review some documents she's having trouble with. As it turns out, Yuzuha is now the head of a big project, which amuses Yoshida as she was once a big-time slacker, and in 2 years' time, she's changed so much. Eri then approaches the group and offers to take them all out to dinner in celebration of Yuzuha's project. However, Yoshida declines as he has prior commitments. Eri understands, but Yuzuha mentions that Yoshida owes her a date, which confuses him. Late that night while walking home, Yoshida briefly talks on the phone with Asami, and then finds Sayu sitting by the same lamppost he first found her. The two then do a brief reenactment of when they first met with one another. Subscribe for more anime recaps just like this.